All right, welcome back. My name is Kyotaro Tsutsui, and I'm a senior fellow here, professor of sociology. I also co-direct the Center for Human Rights and International Justice. And I'm the deputy director of Asia Pacific Research Center, and we are delighted and honored to co-host this event. Welcome to Stanford for all of you, and thank you to Larry and Frank for the wonderful speeches that they gave. So this was a very powerful session, and as somebody who has been studying the efficacy of the international human rights regime, which consists of human rights institutions, human rights treaties, various organs hosted at the United Nations, European Union, and other international organizations, I was very moved and also intrigued by your approaches to moving things forward in terms of human rights advocacy. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the audience, so I'd like to make sure that we'll have enough time for Q&A. And from my end, I'd like to throw out a few questions at you. First, I'd like to, this was a relatively contained, brief presentation, and I'm sure you have a lot more stories to tell about your activism. And I'm wondering if you could say a few words about what you couldn't say in your presentation about your approaches to activism, your methods, who did you approach, and why you choose it? Is it, some of that might be because of external constraints, but some of that might be options that you have and you made a conscious decision to choose your particular method. So if we could start, since we just talked about that with you two, if you could we could start from the, in the order that you presented for this question, that would be great.
Thank you for asking the question. I came to the United States at the age of 18, not having a plan at all. I grew up wanting to become a dancer, which is totally not related to what I'm doing right now. And I still hope one day I can go back to becoming a dancer. And so I don't have to be involved in politics anymore, having to discuss authoritarian regimes every single day or even dreaming about them every single night. So I was thrown into this path or in this country. I did not choose to be there. However, after I decided to become an advocate, it was very tough to choose a focus. I always believe that there's a saying, start by step, right? Because only that you can achieve the smaller goals in order to achieve the bigger goals. And well, the Chinese human rights issue, it's a pretty big issue because it's not only in fact affecting people inside China, but also affecting people globally. And it's not only affecting ethnic groups like the Tibetans, like the Uyghurs, but it's also affecting broader Chinese communities as well. We know more recently, we know about the Chinese white paper movements where Chinese students protested against the COVID policies. And then a little moving backwards, there's the Hong Kong protest where the Chinese government, had the police brutalities in Hong Kong, cracking down and pro-democracy movement leaders. And but why did I focus on why did I choose to focus on forced labor, Uyghur forced labor, out of freedom of expression, gender-based sexual harassment, forced sterilization, feminist movement? They're all equally important, but I believe forced labor is the very reason that the Chinese government have been able to maintain its repressive policies for the past few years and have been even able to expand it for even to other countries. And the Chinese government is able to profit off forced labor practices or cheap labors. And that way they're able to accumulate mass amount of money to build more surveillance checkpoints, build more surveillance cameras, to abuse more people at the border. And for instance, in China, not only there are Chinese forced labor workers and Uyghur forced labor workers. There are North Korean forced labor workers, thousands of them, in seafood industry and various beauty industries as well. And the Chinese government has been working with the North Korean governments in exploiting their own people. So it's a very common tactic that authoritarian regimes do. Like they learn from each other, they copy from each other, and they cooperate with each other to abuse their own people and to make the most benefit for themselves to continue its abuses in the future. So that's why I chose the forced labor approach instead of the dancing and many more important topics. Yeah.
If I could follow up, can you say a little bit more about the Uyghur forced labor checker that you showed when you presented?
Yes. So a few years ago when the Human Rights Foundation reached out to our coalition to ask, like, what are some of the companies that are heavily being complicit in Uyghur forced labor? Because they had a wonderful team that was able to implement this plugin that you could download it. It only works on laptops, on computers, so not on phones. Once you add it to your Google Chrome, it's free, completely free. Whenever you shop, whether, for instance, you go to www.zara.com, let's say, when a company is, if there's evidence of being linked to Uyghur forced labor, you will see a banner pop up on the right top corner. It would say, oops, this brand might be tainted by Uyghur forced labor. Are you sure you still want to shop from there? You could choose yes or no. I mean, if you choose yes, I guess you just, if you choose no, then it will redirect you to a page, information page, where you can learn more about this issue. And it has many more brands. And I know that it now can function not only in the US, but several other countries as well. And hopefully, I know HRF team is working on getting more brands included on the checker. So it's a very useful tool. And it also helps, people who are lazy like me, who don't want to spend 1,000 hours a day to do research every time before I shop, like, okay, which brands are complicit in forced labor? So this is a very quick tool. You go to the website, immediately will pop up. It also has positive examples. If a brand had committed to end Uyghur forced labor, have committed to perform better and be more sustainable and ethical, then the banner will say, congratulations, this brand have tried everything they can to help ending Uyghur forced labor. You may proceed. So it provides not only, like a reminder of whether this brand is complicit, but also provides you an alternative list of things that you could be shopping from that are slightly safer.
That's great.
Before I handle this discuss, I apologize if I make any mistakes in English. I'm still learning English, which is hardest language ever in my life. So sometimes you need to be patient to understand what I'm saying. As I told in my speech, when I was 21, I made my life to come to South Korea and starting my new life without anyone. I'm still alone. I don't know what happened to my family members. I have no idea. But also there is a way that I can contact maybe my relatives, but I don't want to. After 3 hours, the 3 hours after escape, I heard my grandma's voice and I had nightmares for 6 months and decided not to contact my family members at all because I didn't want to think about my past. I want to look forward to becoming a better person that my grandparents can proud of me. And as you know, a lot of contents about North Korea, how hard it is to escape from North Korea through all the countries, China, Myanmar, or other countries. But it's not many contents, not many stories how North Korean defectors are struggling to adjust in a new society, caught because of the different language barriers, because different cultures, so many stuff. When I was let me give you an example. When I worked at a Paris Baguette as my first the part-time job, there are a lot of items that I couldn't remember, that I never experienced of tasting it. And I had to sell the product to the customers, but I couldn't keep up because I had to put the names on the screen that I'd never done in my life. And I had to explain what ingredients are in the bread, and I got fired after 1 month. And I had to figure it out, how could I survive in this new country? And 20% of North Korean defectors in South Korea are not satisfied with the new life in South Korea, because there are three reasons. One is cultural differences, and the other one is psychological the traumas, and third one is economical problems. Because of different accents, South Koreans discriminate North Korean defectors, and it's hard to make them hard to get a job. If you don't have food, how can you raise your voices? So a lot of organizations, a lot of people make activism to solve human rights issues within North Korea, but not many people focus on the issues of North Korean defectors. So what I do now, I do work in an NGO helping economic independence for North Korean defectors by giving them job opportunities and educating South Koreans how can cooperate with North Korean defectors in South Korea. For me, to solve human rights issues without embracing 35 North Korean defectors living in democratic society, we can't discuss human rights issues. 20,000 million people within North Korea. That's what I do right now for the activism.
Wonderful. In your presentation, you mentioned that you were basically censored in appearing on a South Korean TV show, and that's why you wanted to quit. Can you say a little bit about what kind, and you mentioned how, depending on who's in power in South Korea, you were kind of pushed in a certain direction in your discourse. Can you say a little bit more about the censorship?
Yeah, so the TV show was very popular among North Korean defectors and also extends to South Korean audiences. So when there was a power like a conservative party, they do switch the topics like please that conservative party in power, and also they also focus on the issues when the other opposite part, the conservative progressive party, and realize that audiences don't have freedom to choose what they want to hear. Only they spread the issues, the people who have a power to share their stories. Even me, like someone who is from North Korea, have different perspectives about life and experiencing of horrible situations, couldn't share our own stories because the people who have a power to control our freedom of expression, freedom of opinions.
Great, thank you.
I hope, as to the question why, given my age, I hope I've graduated from that why, because I will go way back to my teen years, so that'll take 2 hours to explain. But I just want to say this, I served as the president of Tibetan government exile for 10 years, from 2011 to 21. From 2011 to 17, it was very difficult. Everybody want to engage with China, do business with China, so wherever you go from capitals to capitals, and they reject you, they don't want to meet with you, So you make your case. Even I was not allowed to enter the State Department, White House for a whole 10 years because I was president of government exile. They don't recognize government exile. That was the reason, excuse they gave. But whenever the interim, Syrian government was formed, they were going to the 7th floor and meeting with Hillary Clinton, and the interim government of Venezuela, it was just formed a few weeks ago, and they come to White House and State Department. You can clearly see this double standard, right? And then imagine other capitals around the world, right? But since 2017, it has changed because there's a consensus in DC now. China is adversary number 1. Large number of European countries are coming around. India is coming around, Japan, all that. When I see these, I say it's a vindication, right? We've been making the case for 60 years. You have no idea what you are dealing with. The Chinese world order, the system. And the thinking, the mindset was that, Tibet is an exception, is sad, but we can do business with China. We can shake hands with Chinese president. We can get along. China will come to our side, become more free and more democratic, right? It didn't, But we've been saying that for 60 years. You don't trust this. So then I started I make this argument, and it can be substantiated, that if you want to understand China, you must understand Tibet. If you don't understand Tibet, you will never understand China. My point being, for example, 2013, Xi Jinping became a Belt and Road Initiative. So they say, we'll build road, we'll build railways, we'll build seaport. It will benefit you and it will benefit us. Prosperity will all over the world. And my argument is, Tibet was promised the same thing. We'll build one road connecting China to Tibet. Tibetans will prosper, we will prosper, right? That road was built, trucks came, tanks came, guns came, occupied a country. The one road has become 100 roads leading to all our natural resources now. Right? One railway line is bringing heavy machines to exploit more. So we've been saying, Belt and Road Initiative, people were like, there were like headlines, glowing headlines. China is doing something for the prosperity of the world. I said, hey, it happened to Tibet. No one listened. Then the surveillance system. There are 300 million surveillance cameras in China, and China is the most controlled watch country in the world. The first surveillance camera was put in Chokhang Temple in 1987. Right? Now the Chinese surveillance system is bought in 70-plus countries. The internal security of even Vietnam, which is an ally of America, right? All over, they buy Chinese surveillance system, but the DNA of the surveillance camera starts in Tibet. So I can go on. For example, the martial law was imposed in March 1989 in Tibet. Then martial law was imposed in Beijing in June 1989. For example, the Tibetan scholars were denied visa to enter Tibet, right, in early 2000. When it happened, all the China scholars said, no, but we get visas to go to China. The Tibetan law is an exception. Then now they are denied visa, right? Journalists were not allowed to visit Tibet initially. Later, journalists were not allowed to. Now they're constrained to visit China as well. NGOs, foreign NGOs were banned first in Tibet, right? Then they were banned in China, now all over the world. So what happens in Tibet happens in China and happens around the world. So that's the argument we try to make. And then recently there was a Chinese scholar who was a fair-minded scholar who was making a presentation about how American imposed tariffs on trade with China is so unfair, right? And it's Donald Trump, who did this, right? So it's not, beneficial to Americans or Chinese, so we must have dialogue so we can have a mutually beneficial solution. And our counter-narrative is, hold on a second, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been saying, let's have dialogue to seek autonomy for Tibetans for 30 years, and Chinese government has been ignoring us, So it's the counter-narrative. And the list goes on. And then the natural resources exploitation, it happened in Tibet. Now, when people read about Uyghur, genocide in Uyghur area, Mongolians, Hong Kong, maybe Taiwan, that's what we've been saying. You are dealing with a regime, with a system, that threatens internally in Asia as a whole and the whole world. That's the system we live under. And you all must learn lessons from Tibetans, because we are the victims. Because when China moves an inch or even a needle, we feel the pain. Unless China, uses acts, Washington, D.C. and Brussels and other countries, they don't even notice, you see. So when we say something, you better listen. So that's the point I try to make. And then when I was listening to the Chinese official, he said, this unfair trade tariff. But then people forget, in 1996-7, Denmark tried to move a resolution about human rights violation in China and mentioned Tibet at the UN Human Rights Commission. China cut off trade with Denmark, imposed tariff. And Liu Xiaobo was given Nobel Peace Prize. But Nobel Peace Committee, which has nothing to do with Norway as a country, China imposed tariff on Norway, and banned, they said, we will not go to buy your salmon, And Slovakia, right, president was threatened, Sweden, a Swedish citizen, Chinese publisher, used to publish books critical of China, and he was bathing in the beach of Taiwan. He was picked and then sentenced in China, and Sweden said, please don't do that, he's our citizen. Tariff was imposed, trade was banned. Australia said, well, what is the origin of COVID? We want to know. tariff was imposed, trade was banned. So that's why China has been weaponizing trade and tariff for 30 years. So people should know that, you know. So now when America imposes tariff, it's so unfair. Even Americans are saying that's unfair, you know. It harms us as well, you know. So these are the narrative, the bigger picture we should know. So we are not speaking simply as victims. We are speaking of our experience so that you won't be next. So unfortunately, Hong Kongers used to say, you know, Tibet first, we could be next. They used to have banners. It happened to them. Now Taiwan is saying, it could happen. And then now, Asian countries are saying. So we've been the victim, but we are also a witness. Now, because there's a consensus in DC, in Brussels, everywhere, it's in a way, it's a vindication. It's almost like, we told you so. And if you don't listen to us now, it's at your own peril.
And I imagine Tibetan government in exile is among the earlier ones, maybe the first one to be established, and it's probably one of the most influential, most present in these discussions. Some of us had a chance to meet with leadership of the government in exile of Myanmar. I'm wondering if there's any kind of coalition of government in exile. Do you have interaction with those other leaders of government in exile of repressive countries?
I didn't give you this pointer, right? We didn't discuss about
it.
Because I'm writing a book about this. You know, I have to pitch in, right? So I'm writing a book on how to set up and run democratic government exile. My argument is that the rise of autocratic system, democratic backsliding, it's an ironic because the funding for promotion of democracy has increased by hundreds of millions. Promotion for election has increased by billions of dollars, okay? Funding is increasing, activists are increasing, more organizations are increasing, but democracy is backsliding, freedom is backsliding. So there's a contradiction. Because those who study democracy, you know, Larry Diamond included, Schumpeter, Dahl, and everybody, they say democracy assumes state. Democracy assumes territory. They don't study exile. It's outside the purview of conventional academic thinking about democracy. Those who study about exile, you know, freedom fighters, we all talk about movements and activism. They don't study democracy. So Tibetan government exile is a unique blend where there is a philosophical and theoretical contradiction between democracy and freedom movement, because freedom movement means unity, single leadership, single voice. But then democracy means instead of single leadership, there has to be opposition. Instead of single voice, there has to be freedom of speech. Instead of unity, there has to be diversity. There's a fundamental contradiction between the two, yet Tibetans have managed to blend this contradiction and run a democratic government exile. So that's my prescription to Venezuelans and Afghans and Belarus and everybody. Form government exile, have a united front, you know, not a Chinese united front, okay, our democratic united front, because that's what the autocratic leaders fear the most. They will not fear if exile, let's say Hong Kongers, any dissidents, successful individuals, they don't fear. It's organized front they fear the most. So government exile is difficult to form. So I'm writing a manual. You can form government exile, you can form a parliament exile, you can form advocacy in exile, you can form Democrat Party in exile. I did 15 years of academic research, I wrote my dissertation on it, and I have 10 years of experience running a government exile. So I've also asked, you know, contributing writers from Burma, Belarus, Afghan, you know, Syrian, the Venezuelan, and Uyghur, and Hong Kongers, and Mongolians, all to write. So this becomes a manual for all the dissidents and exiled people to how to set up and run government exile. Now, but there are, again, I can go on and on, but there I can give at least 10 challenges. When you form a government, there will be 10 challenges. Host country is very important. Host country can derail you or help you. Right? Corruption is one of the reasons why many government exile fail. And co-optation, right? And then assassination, you know, division, trauma, egos. There are a lot of challenges when you. It's not that easy, and we have succeeded. So we want to share this model. Now, for example, Burmese, what they say is they did form government exile. It was a failure. Now they come up with a new model, which is interim government, but they are present inside Burma because they control 1/3 of the territory, and they have presence at the border and also outside. So they don't call it government exile because that's a bad name, right? But then they have also moved from civil resistance to violent arms resistance because they say that's the only way we can defeat the juntas, right? So there are many models of government exile, and Burmese model is one. So, if you do the government exiles have succeeded. Polish government exile, Spanish government exile, Baltic embassies in exile have succeeded, right? Exile leaders like, Bulgaria's prince returned back and became the prime minister of Bulgaria, ANC, African National Congress, was exiled, returned back, brought democracy in Africa. UNITA of Angola, right? So list goes on. There's so many success stories. Ramos Horta was in exile. I've met him many times. Now he's a leader of East Timor, right? So there are many exile leaders who have successfully brought democracy back home. The exile governments who have replicated and replaced the autocratic system, and many government exiles have disappeared and failed and collapsed. So learn lessons from all this and be a manual. And then the way to counter rise of autocratic system is to have a government exile, a democratic one. That's bring unity and challenge. So I hope this book, again, the exiles and dissidents, they lack funds, right? So this is not to make a bestseller and sell it for $100 a book, but I want to make it an open access, online, accessible, very Buddhist, Dalai Lama's follower kind of book, okay? When it's released, you better click and then make it useful.
Fantastic, great. Last but not least.
Yeah, I started to involve in activism since 2016 by my election campaign. Before that, just like most of Vietnamese in my country, I didn't know about democracy. I didn't even know what freedom of expression is. Because we've been brainwashed for a long time. Like after the war, the Communist Party lead the country and we've under their control and we've been brainwashed. And at the point, they opened a little bit. So we have internet in my country. That's where people can access to the world. And we kind of know, what is democracy? What is the real democracy? And what is freedom? And because I'm an artist, many people ask me why I was a pop star, why I became a dissident artist, an activist. Because the artist inside me cannot stand the censorship system. The artist inside me want to fight for freedom. Because I've seen many people in my country, many artists in my country suffer under the censorship system. But they didn't know how to change, how to make a change. How can the country become democracy if they don't know what freedom of expression is? So my activism focused on freedom of expression. But since I became an activist, the government just make a lot of problems to my life, and I was forced to leave my country at the end of 2019. The government continued to arrest all of my activist friends. Some of them was forced to live in exile like me. And recently, the government has been moving the target to NGO, climate activists, scientists. That is their new target. And the big challenge is we all in exile or in jail now. We cannot make a movement. We cannot do anything. And the world also happening a lot of wars, the rise of authoritarians. The big challenge is how can we get attention to have support from the world. People in Vietnam, they have changed their mind, their life. But right now, they don't know what to do. They don't know how. They don't know what to do to make the change inside the government. And that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
And I must ask, have you been able to reach President Obama since that time? Any interaction with him? Or his
after
office?
that meeting, I've never met Obama again.
Okay, that's somewhat disappointing. But what you said about how activists cannot rely on foreign heroes and heroines to come down and save the local community, that's a very powerful message. Right. And I'm wondering, I study how the international human rights regime could or could not help improve local practices. I'm wondering if you can speak to what kind of institutions have been somewhat helpful, like whether it's United Nations human rights forums or the EU forums or ASEAN, or more like human rights NGOs like Human Rights Foundation or Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. What outside entities have been particularly helpful for your activism? Maybe you can start from here this time.
Yes. International organizations have been very helpful for us because without their help, we cannot do anything. We were forced to leave the country, cut off the connections from the country, and we still trying to fight. And all of the international organizations are enemies of our governments. I think the best way to do right now is just somehow we gathering together, we come together and connect together to make something outside of the countries to support for the new young activists in the country that still fighting. So what I'm doing is going to perform, to speak a lot, and we can spread the message about our country. Mm-hmm. So we have more support from people.
That's wonderful. Spreading information, raising awareness, those are particularly important methods. Anything to add from?
United Nations or international organizations, now with the Ukraine war, clearly it's shown its limitations now, Mm-hmm. Even WHO with the COVID, right? Taiwan has been very successful at the fight against SARS, but they were not even allowed to have, forget about membership, okay? Not even to have a role to play to share their expertise, But I personally think the veto power should be gotten rid of. It's just too outdated, because the fact that Russia has veto power, United Nations just cannot do anything about Ukraine. The Secretary General of United Nations just cries and screams and shouts and says it's wrong in Ukraine, what's happened in Ukraine, invasion of one country by the other. You can't do anything. Mm. It's just useless. So I think the veto power should be removed. And the founding fathers or the founding members of the United Nations felt this is the discussion group where you should talk to each other. They should have right to discuss, no veto power. Because many people advocate expansion of Security Council, and India is one of the potential members. I have full sympathy for that, but I still feel more members of the Security Council veto power means once they abuse, that's like, you have given license to kill. So just get rid of veto power and then allow all the members have equal right. Even then, it's a challenge. Genocide of Uyghur people is real. But when the United members, start voting, 51 countries supported a resolution, a mild resolution. Okay, 150 countries nearly didn't vote. So it's really lopsided, So, and then as far as Tibet is concerned, as I said, bold countries like Denmark or others, right? They try to bring a resolution. I've been to UN Human Rights Commission. When it was subcommittee also, I've been there. They just allow you to make your point. That's it. It's just a discussion group. If you expect they'll come and vote and support you, not possible at all. So I think major reforms, are needed. Otherwise, it's just a name. Those victims who suffer the most don't get any support at all.
So, what is the best way of helping this activism as an external entity? I can say, of course, there are a lot of international organizations or social enterprise to help people who don't have rights. But in my view, I think the power of changing is within ourselves. Someone like me who is from dictatorship without any freedom of rights and now living in democratic country and with a better life, better hope, it is the best way that I can influence people who are born with the freedom in this society, so they can think about this value of freedom and then help others who don't have voices. So for me, that is the best way that I can solve the problem of North Korea. And the other one, I can say the economic independence for the minority people who don't have much rights as majority groups in democratic society. Because why I say this? If someone who is economically stable, they are more likely to participate in the democratic activism and engagement, also allowing them to broad different voices, which are the fundamental aspects of democracy. It will contribute to the inclusive democracy. So for me, it's like helping North Korean defectors or other minority people for economic independence also is the best way that the organizations or individuals have to focus on.
Great.
I'm on the same page with Lobsang on this. Sorry for being critical, but UN had repeatedly proven that they have failed the human rights impacted groups. Just a couple of years ago, the former UN High Commissioner, Michelle Bachelet, was finally, after arranging it for 1,000 times, they finally was able to visit China and visit the Uyghur region. And after the so-called investigation, and the former High Commissioner was not even able to release the report, an adequate report, until the last day of her office.
Last hour.
Last hour, yes.
Midnight before
she literally the 1 hour before she was going to be ending her position, she was finally able to release a report which was having very mild language, such as maybe constitutes of crimes against humanity. So very mild languages, even though there are mounting evidence proving that there's genocide happening in the Uyghur region. And on top of that, also, Lobsang mentioned about the veto power. If you're looking at UN now, one of the worst perpetrator of women's rights violator is now sitting as a chair of the Women's Committee at UN. So when you are looking at such evidence, you will really see how ineffective the whole UN system is now, and with what's happening in the Middle East, it's just so many more proof. Although it doesn't mean that we should stop working with the UN, because when you're seeing something is failing, you need to help them to become better. So same thing with China. When you see the Chinese government is continuously perpetrating human rights abuses in various regions with the various people, you do not just ignore them and let them continue doing them. You help them become better. And also, I'm not sure how many students are from China here. I think in order to really help with the movement, I think we need to first adjust our mindset. If we criticize a country or criticize an entity or criticize any political policy, does not mean hating on or canceling on that country or that culture. It is to help improve the situation of that country, of that entity. I think I grew up in China, spent like decades there. The education system that I grew up in made me believe that any negative things that I voice about my people, my neighborhood, my country, means I'm hating on my country, that I am no longer patriotic. But that should not be the narrative. If your kids made a mistake, if they push someone in school, are you going to be like, keep going, good job? Or are you going to say, oh, this is wrong, we should be doing something different next time and provide better solutions? Of course you're going to choose the latter because you love the kid. So I really want to bring up the idea of like, for Chinese students, yes, I believe you have, I'm sure you have the, concerns of whether you should criticize your country or certain policies or voice your support for any group that are not your own. Yes, I understand where your concerns are coming from, but also we need to adjust our mindset of how, when we're correlating criticism as hate, that's different. You could relate them as love as well, and it is helping your own country to become better. So because I've seen very limited support from the Chinese pro-democracy movements when it comes to support for Tibetan groups, support for Mongolians, for Uyghurs. Oftentimes they are only wanting to voice concerns over human rights violations happening inside mainland cities, but not that's happening in Tibet or Uyghurs. And then on top of that, I think it's really important to form coalitions of a very diverse group. So it's natural for people to have different opinions, and a normal society will allow more than one voices. However, when we are seeking for support or help, we tend to look for organizations that align with our political views. That is natural. However, we should not discriminate people that do not directly align with your political views. So I myself, I identify as a liberal. However, I work with people who have very diverse political views. With the coalition that I'm part of, there are people who are trade unionists. There are people who are anti-communist. There are people who are pro-communist. There are people who are Jewish groups. There are Muslim groups. They're so diverse. We have student groups, faith-based groups. We have churches to synagogues to mosques supporting the whole initiative of ending Uyghur forced labor. And I think the most important thing is to finding the common ground. We all have one goal, which is to end the human rights abuses of whatever cause that you care the most about. Find your allies. Even if you're not allies in other aspects, you do not have to agree with everything. Even twins raised by the exact same pair of parents would have different opinions. So total strangers on the other side of the world will, of course, will believe in different things. They grew up listening to different types of news. I do not believe everything that Fox News said. I probably do not believe most of the things that they say a lot of times, but that does not mean that the audience that are listening to Fox News are not important, because those are the very audience that you should be reaching. Or if you're a Fox News listener, and you think that CNN is not, or BBC is not a worthwhile news agency to talk to or to be reaching out to. But no, the audience is the very ones that you need to be targeting to have them to be joining your cause. So yeah, forming a coalition of diverse group, I think is very important. And with the coalition to end forced labor in the Uyghur region that Human Rights Foundation is part of, my organization, which is the Worker Rights Consortium, is part of. Worker Rights Consortium is a pure labor rights investigation group. We only talk to workers normally, and Human Rights Foundation talk to activists around the world. It's a very different group, even though, but we all have one common thing. We care about, human rights, and I think finding that common ground and forming a coalition will be the most effective than just talking to one entity or one group of people.
Right. Thank you. Should we move to? I think it's about time that we move to Q&A. I have a few more questions, but if you have any questions, please raise your hand and. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. My name is Grace, and I'm from Thailand. And similar in our country, we've gone from authoritarian regimes to military coup d'etat. From recently, the weaponization of government institutions to suppress opposition parties, and also towards deeply rooted corruption. And so I would love to hear your thoughts about what do you think are the key factors for us to mobilize democracy, considering that the people in power will always come up with different types of rhetoric against the democratic movement?
Who would like to?
I think depoliticizing and whatever issue that you care about is the key. Oftentimes during the movement, people tend to politicize heavily the issue in order to get attention of the governments that you want the help from, and because oftentimes the political motive is the one that drives that government to put on action. For example, in terms of the Uyghur work or the Tibetan work, is because there is a U.S.-China political tension. We all admit it's there, and when the U.S. wants to, whether it's sanctions or propose laws, there are political motives behind it, and which is driving many people far away from joining this effort in pro-democracy, ending Uyghur forced labor, ending the, bring back, self-determination for Hong Kongers, for Tibetans. People are reluctant in joining because they think, oh, it's feeding into the propaganda or feeding into the U.S.-China war. So I think finding whatever ways you are using, I think it will apply differently for different cause, but depoliticizing issues and going back to the same talking points, forming coalitions of people, finding that one mutual common ground with all the groups, no matter how, what their political agenda is, no matter what their political motive is, or no matter what their ideology is, find that one common ground and then depolitize the issue together, make it a very focus on human rights instead of other aspects of it. I think that would be a key factor.
No, it's a global, really, Larry and Fukuyama, and I subscribe. No, it's really a global challenge, right? There are more countries which are not democratic. Means increasingly, even those who get elected, right, in their second term, they lean more towards non-democratic system. If they get elected the third time, backsliding happens. They start censoring, discourage institutions and curtail institutions. So whatever is happening in Thailand is just a global trend. But then they all are forming alliances, right? For example, in Thailand or Vietnam, you just name it. The internal security system is bought from China. Right? For example, physically, all the surveillance cameras, right? And then they study each other. They learn from each other. And democratic countries, we keep debating, and then it's democracy. I subscribe to democracy because the foundation is freedom, right? It has own pitfalls and weaknesses, but this is a better option than a non-democratic system because we are the victims. We've been suffering, right? So this is a global threat. And then I don't want to say your generation, it's a bit unfair, right? Because we lived through post-Soviet Union, Berlin Wall collapse, at least 30 years. Larry, we had democracy, freedom, So you're getting a raw end now. Climate change, you will suffer, right? More autocratic system, more surveillance system, that's also a fact. And then now, the lack of autocracy in democracy is very similar to at the beginning of First World War and Second World War. I mean, there is an element of that. It's very similar, right? So, and then there is a likely war, right? Thucydides' trap of the 16, great wars that took place between the number 1 and number 2 in the world. 12 times it was settled through war, right? So you have 75% chances. During your time, there will be Third World War, okay? So it's very unfair, unfortunately, but that's a fact. You all have to shoulder these responsibilities. And Martin Luther King said, let freedom ring. You have to fight for freedom.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm in deep admiration of all of your courage and work and the example that you set for the generations to come. I think something that we all would recognize is how difficult it is for a movement for democracy and freedom to finally succeed, right? When North Korea will finally be over, when the Chinese Communist Party will finally be over. It's a pretty tiring journey. Your friends may leave you, people don't listen, it's the wrong time, and you fundraise, and you talk to people, a lot of time spent in loneliness. It's not every day that you get to go to conferences at Stanford. Most of your time was probably quite different. How do you keep yourself going and in a good spirit in exile for a cause that is eternal?
No, I'm Buddhist, we believe in mortality, So we say, hey, that dictator is bad, don't worry, he'll die. So all the dictators will die. We don't have to worry about it. It's a fact. It's inevitable. All great powers collapse. We have 2,000 years of history in the world, right? So in this 100 years, like 7 empires collapsed, from Ottoman Empire to Austro-Hungarian to, you just name it. So it's inevitable. So as a Buddhist, we believe in law of impermanence. Nothing is permanent. So don't worry about it, So our job, again, that's why our job, we have long-term perspective. Our job is not that I will bring down that dictator, but I will be part of that bridge who will connect me to the new second coming generation who will continue to fight. When that happens, we are there to restore democracy and freedom. So that should be your perspective, So it's, as I said, it's very tiring to take, a flight from Boston to here, and flight is delayed, airport is boring, and as hotel rooms are always boring, But then there's a larger cause. Because again, as a Buddhist, we are always told, West, you celebrate birthdays. You are born, they get so excited. Then they get midlife crisis. I'm 50, oh my God, there's so many candles, right? But Tibetans, we are taught, we don't celebrate birthdays. We are taught to look at life differently. You are born, you will die. Death and birth are two sides of the same coin. Now you accept the fact that you are going to die. What will you do while you live? That matters. My job is to carry the flag of freedom till I die. And I die happily. So that I don't get burnt out, I don't get stressed out, Because I say, what? I'm carrying this responsibility. This is a global, civilizational, humanities cause. I want to be on the good side. Because, I'm Buddhist, I want to be Buddha. I want to attain Buddhahood, right? So you have to earn good karma for that. So this is my selfish reason why this is how I earn my good karma. So I'm come here, my karma has doubled in my account. I know that. And the dictator's karma going down. He will suffer a lot in hell. I know that. I have a lot of testimonies from hell. All the dictators, I know they suffer a lot. We get the penthouse in our next life. They get a dark cell.
Alice.
That's karma.
No stress. It's fantastic. Sometimes I'm so struggling to talking about same issues about North Korea, but nothing has changed. Still, North Korean regime grab the power to control and suppress individual human rights. So thank you for recognizing my tiredness of activism. Besides that, what I do is I do work at an NGO, support North Korean defectors' economical independence, and with a less paying job than people in corporation, but I can earn more values than any other people earn a lot of money, because there is a value that I can do something for my people. And when I see the results, like for example, a few months ago, 2 North Korean defectors got a job at a big law firm. That made me so happy, and with that energy, I can keep going my life, facing all the issues, maybe internally or externally. And also this time, meet you guys, support North Korean human rights and all the individual human rights in this country carries me to keep going for my future, for my hope.
Yes, the same here. Just only hope that things that you have to lean on to keep going. You're sometimes frustrated about something, but hope will give you energy to keep going.
For me, I try my best to recognize the small wins. And I think that's my suggestion whenever young Uyghur activists come to me and say, how do you deal with burnouts? I said, burnouts oftentimes is coming from overworking yourselves and not looking at the achievements at all. So that's how you get burnouts. And I've been doing this since the moment I stepped foot in the US, about 11 years ago. But yes, the Chinese government might have continuously, perpetrating human rights abuses in the Uyghur region and in many other areas in China. However, that doesn't mean there has not been any positive change. I think it's important to recognize every positive steps, every step by step. For instance, a few years ago, majority of the people in this room, I'm sure, have never even heard of the Uyghur people. Maybe until very recently, you probably learned, oh, there are Muslims in China? I did not know that. That's a small win for me. I tried really hard to achieve that. For many years, I went all around the world, anywhere that would not deport me back to China, that I told them who the Uyghurs are. And I made sure to let people know Uyghurs. And when they hear this term, they will recognize, and it will ring a bell at what is happening to them. That is a small win. Well, I would consider that a big win. And Uyghur people fought for decades for that to happen. That doesn't mean that Uyghur people are free by having their names recognized, but that's a first step. A few years ago, I would not have dreamed of having a legislation that is dedicated to raising awareness on Uyghur people. Now there are 3 in the US. Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act. I would not have dreamt that. That's wins. Those are big wins. And people fought for decades for that to happen. I think that keeps me going. I'm dedicated to have more legislations or more detailed, more effective ways of implementing these laws to happen. And I'm actively working with the CBP, Custom Border Protection, in helping them with implementing the current import ban in a more adequate and rigorous way, more enforce it in a better way. And also, I think we need to learn to give ourselves credits. Many human rights activists were way too humble, and we do not recognize what we have achieved. And we just say apologize all the time. No, the dictators should be apologizing to us. And we should recognize all the years of efforts and time we have dedicated into this, the sleepless nights. And when we're sleeping, all the nightmares that we've been having, we should give ourselves credits. And all these are, I consider them as small wins as well. And the matter of fact that you are asking this question, that is a small win. And I think we should all recognize that, because people are seeing us. That means you have seen our work. And hopefully today or tomorrow you will bring our messages to the next person, and that person will be connected to another person. I forgot where I read it from. Every person can be able to connect to someone from the other side of the world through 11 connections. And we never know that who our messages will be delivered to, and where it will be delivered to, and how it's going to be impacting them, and who eventually be able to trigger a change. And I believe in the butterfly effects as well. It's the first time people ringing the bell of who the Uyghurs are led to the passage of a sanction or with the whole release order or an import ban. And with the voting of certain legislations in the country, I think those are all part of the movement. And you might not see it at that moment, but we should recognize that we're all part of that. We've been contributing to it. It will take time. And this will be a big fight, and that is okay.
Thank you. Was there, I think we have one last, or maybe combining two questions, you can pass it on.
Okay. I would like to congratulate Stanford for hosting this forum, and also I would like to thank you, the panel, for having this discussion. I have a lot of admiration for you, for the kind of work that you do. I know it takes a lot of effort and difficulties at times, and I'm support you guys whenever I can. With that being said, as American, I think we need to be aware that everything is spoken here, is all a tangent, a scale, right? Vietnam, China, whatever, and US. The fact that we are here able to discuss this is a big plus, but we are not absolute ideal, right? There might be freedom of expressions. There's no freedom of expression in Vietnam. In fact, that we can talk here is great, but there's a lot of information that we don't hear. We think that we have freedom of expression, that we hear the truth here. And I beg you to dig deeper, look for alternative sources instead of just the mainstream media, because we know places like in the Middle East right now, there's a genocide going, and we are, in the US, American, we are complicit in this genocide, and the news media is not talking about it so much. It's very important that we're looking for alternative news sources. There's freedom, human rights, oppression in the Middle East, in Gaza, and we're not talking about it. So it's important to point that out. We don't have total freedom of expression. There's a lot of silence in the US when there's a lot of human rights, freedom. A lot of journalists killed in Gaza because there's certain power there, not allow their voices to be heard. Okay. The fact that we are here is great, and we are on a better tangent scale than in Vietnam and China, but be aware that we are not completely free, and the information we receive are not completely on us. That's all I have to say.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. My biggest question, I guess, is when you come to these forums, when you speak to all these people, what would your biggest piece of advice be for what to do? I'm half Chinese, I've never been to China, I read in the news about all these horrible different human rights abuses and feel really powerless as to what I myself can do. So what are your suggestions as someone, for me, for example, as somewhat of an outsider, to be able to help and how to aid these crises that are happening across the world?
I don't know, everyone has their own values to find themselves. I can say happy with your life. I mean, there are a lot of tons of things that I can say. Engage with the human rights, and then share the contents, what you see about abusing human rights issues in any other countries. I can say that, but my advice is that happy with your life in this country, and try to appreciate what you have right now, not things that what you don't have, because what you have right now is that not many people, like North Korean people, 25 million people in North Korea, do not have. So appreciate the value of freedom and democracy, and share the value with the others by engaging in activism, like with the HRF and any other international related NGO, and dream big, and then maybe start your company, whatever, and the position, and hire minority group, people who doesn't have their own voices, who doesn't have much opportunities as like majority people in this country. That's what I want to say.
I think as individual, you can just talk with your friends about your concern about the issues that happening around your life, and you choose a topic to follow and raise awareness for people around you to get their attention about things what's happening now. And you can support us by many different ways. Like if you like to support one organization that support for Vietnamese political prisoners or Chinese political prisoners, some organizations like that, you can support them. So that is one of the way that you can help us to fight.
Yeah, if you're asking individually, then it is important to be, keep yourself informed, whether it's Tibet or North Korea or Vietnam or Uyghurs or Mongolians or Hongkongers. Now, you can subscribe to those pages, right? And then you get daily updates. Or you just have to like, and then algorithm will do it and you will be flooded with all the information you need. First, keep yourself informed. Now, if you want to be an activist, then I say if you want to be an activist, don't have expectations. I remember meeting Ramos Horta of East Timor. He said, I was just new, and I said, hey, Ramos, you've been doing this for some time, and how should I keep myself, strong? And he said, you know what? Just keep doing, keep speaking, keep traveling. And he said one day he got invited from Midwest, somewhere from Midwest America, and he changed 2 flights. And one young guy drove him to the venue, and he said there were 6 people waiting, And then, but he spoke to 6 people. The next day he spoke to 60 people, 600 people. But then other day, he spoke to another 10 people. He said, don't have expectations, just keep at it. And then right in front of my eyes, actually, East Timor got independent. He became foreign minister and president, So there are so many examples. Right in front of our eyes, actually, so many successes have happened. Right here. So you just have to keep at it. I have spoken in front of 10,000 people. Yesterday I spoke in front of 400 Tibetans, and I've spoken in various venues. So that's a very Buddhist notion of impermanence. Don't have expectation. I'm a messenger, right? I deliver a message, but I am on the right side. I'm the good guy, right? I am fighting for civilization is at stake. Humanity is at stake. Freedom and democracy is at stake, right? So you have to choose. This is a generational fight. You have to choose. You're on the right side. It's good to be right than wrong. You sleep better. And you have less stressful life. The dictators, they worry all the time. They're paranoid. We sleep well. That's their loss, So you will win. Ultimately, you will win, but you have to keep fighting. That's why when I got elected as Sejong, they said, oh, how you are dealing with China. How can you tackle this, I said, that's not my job. I mean, that's my job, but that's not my immediate goal. Okay? If I make myself, that's my goal, then I'll be obsessed with the goal. Then I stress out about, the goal, and then don't overthink. You overthink. But I said, my job is to be the bridge. Continue the fight, pass on the torch, continue the fight. One day Xi Jinping will be gone. And Communist Party is anyway, communism as a whole and Communist Party is just 100 plus years old. Buddhism is 2,500 years old. There's no competition to begin with. We are the big brother. We will win, right? So, and it happened. That's how history is written, how this 7 empires collapsed or disintegrated in 100 years' time. Right? So the whole history to prove. And then philosophically, and then in life you have a choice to be a good guy or a bad guy. I said, I want to be a good guy. You win, ultimately. So glass is always half full. It depends how you look at it.
While everyone was speaking, I just wrote down 12 things for you to do.
One dozen recommendations.
Are you ready?
This is College Freedom Forum Declaration, 12 points. Go ahead.
Declaration. And most of them will apply to all causes. The first one is everybody kind of mentioned sharing, raising awareness, and share it with the next person you see. Start from your family, start from your classmates, start from your professors, start from your local coffee shop. Like when you're sipping coffee, did you know what happened in blah, 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 blah country? And my favorite phrase is, did you know? And it's a great way to break the ice. I mean, probably not genocide topics to break the ice if you're meeting them, but it's great to start a conversation. And also, but before sharing and raising awareness, I think a key point is to do your due diligence with the information that you have received and do research, because it's going to harm the cause that you care about even more if you happen to spread false information, even though if it's unintentional, because the next person might have done their research and realize that the information that you have spread might be false, and they completely deny that cause existence at the first place. So it would be counterproductive. And also, second one will be, I mentioned about the, talking to your classmates and your schools. There's still only very limited universities or high schools in the US even have a class or part of the class would be talking about the Uyghurs. That's the next thing you can do, whether you're a high school student, college student, master's students. You could talk to your dean, your department, whether they will hire a Uyghur professor or a professor that talks about the Uyghur region, talks about Tibet, talks about North Korea, talk about Vietnam, who are knowledgeable to teach students. So with every semester, there are new groups of activists that will be formed, hopefully after those classes. And then also, download plugin from Human Rights Foundation that can help you shop more, ethically. And also, when it talks about ethically, consider every penny that you spend, where are they going towards? And who are making those things that you are purchasing? Like, always ask that questions. And then except asking your own question to yourselves, where am I spending? Ask other people a question as well. Ask the companies. You can write to Zara, you can write to H&M, you can write to Shein. Where are you sourcing from? Why do you not disclose your supply chain data? Where are your supply chain data down to raw materials? Who are making this? How many hours are they working? How much are they being paid? What their conditions are? Most of the time, those companies won't be able to answer your question because they're guilty or they do not even know. That means they have failed their due diligence on their side. And also you can ask your schools, why haven't you started teaching about what's happening in China, what's happening in North Korea, what's happening in Vietnam? What have you done to help improve the situation, those human rights violations? And also you can ask your school administration and ask, where are the collegiate apparels made? When is Stanford University shirt, Stanford University cup, Stanford University hat, or any other schools, where are they made? Who are making them? How much are they getting paid? Ask the same questions. And if your university or if your school can answer that, great. If they can't, maybe you can push more. You can go from there. And the next one will be identifying and joining coalitions of groups who share the same goal as you. And then also, I think one important thing is the very fact that we're having this panel is great because we're prioritizing impacted groups. And with whatever event that you want to host in the future, make sure to prioritize impacted groups. Invite individuals who are directly impacted because they themselves know the best what they need and what they want to be achieved in their homeland, in their community. And then, of course, cliche, donation. You can donate to organizations that have been doing a great job, and you never know, they might be suffering or they might just need that extra $5 from you. And any help actually counts. The extra $5 they could be contributing to getting a flash drive to North Korea, or they could be getting contribute to supporting a refugee's rent when they first landed in this country. So any help counts, and do not underestimate your support or your voice. And the other thing will be volunteering. So if you say, I do not have money, I'm barely, making ends meet, and also I'm new to this cause, I do not know what I'm doing. Volunteer to an organization who knows what they're doing, and you will learn from there. Trust me, you'll learn so fast from just doing your own research. And then also there are so many films, documentary films, support those documentary films, bring your friends. Instead of going watch some multinational marvels, trillion, billions of dollars involved, those kind of Hollywood stuff, go watch those, activist made films, documentaries. They risk their lives to get those footages out. They risk their families' lives, their people's lives to get those footages out. Yeah, spread them, let more people have access to it. Trust me, they're more entertaining than any of those Hollywood-made movies. And then the last one, I'm just repeating it, be happy with the small wins. Whenever small things you achieved, be happy with it, and don't be satisfied with it, because you will just stop there. But don't be satisfied. Be a little greedy, it's okay, but recognize the small wins and then keep going from there. Yep, that's my 12 items of homework for you today.
You don't have to do all 12 at the same time. Okay?
Yeah, take your time. But
start with one or two.
One of us will grade it one day, eventually, next time when we meet.
That's a wonderful list, and that's a great note to end on. I think the international community scored a major win today, thanks to your sharing of insights and experiences with us. And I think there'll be an opportunity for everybody to talk to them after this with a reception. So please stay. And if you have any questions that you couldn't answer here, feel free to go up to them and ask questions. And just say hi and share some ideas with them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to do a quick closer. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing all of your insights with us today. We're just going, although our program has concluded for the day, we just want to thank you again so much for your time, and we hope you'll take the insights that you've gained from this event far beyond the conference today. I'm joined on stage very quickly by Professor Gulika Reddy, who's the director of the Stanford Law School's International Human Rights and Conflict Resolution Clinic, to just conclude with a few words about careers in the human rights space. Panel again.
Oh, okay.
We can stand up or whatever works. Yeah. Yeah, so I was tasked with talking about what the Human Rights Clinic does in a few minutes. But before I did that, I've been sort of fascinated with this, even from a academic scholarship perspective, on this question of how do you sustain or foster hope in classrooms and in the human rights field. And I was furiously typing on my phone as all of you were speaking, because it was just so energizing to hear the ways in which each of you foster hope in your own practice. Because I'm often, speaking of careers in human rights, I'm often asked by law students, is there any point getting into the human rights field? Is change even possible? And I think, your remarks today were a reminder that not only is change possible, but each of you have managed to contribute to such significant change in your own work. And I think your comments were also a reminder of, the human rights field doesn't have to be all gloom and doom. I found myself constantly chuckling when I was listening to your comments, because each of you are obviously, really badass and brilliant and creative human rights advocates, but you are also so funny in your descriptions of what gives you hope. So yeah, I think in terms of what the Human Rights Clinic does is it's a course at the law school where we equip students for careers in the human rights field. So it's a full-time commitment when Stanford students take it. So for a whole quarter, they don't take any other classes. And there's a seminar where we teach them human rights skills, basically from the human rights and conflict resolution field, and then they apply those skills to different projects around the world. And currently, the clinic is working in 3 different areas. So one is equality and non-discrimination, and we're working primarily on issues around sexuality and race. So we're working with a coalition of trans groups in Jamaica to advance LGBTQ rights there, and we're also working with civil society in Uganda. Last year, there was an anti-homosexuality act that was passed in Uganda that homosexuality was already criminalized, but this act imposes the death penalty for certain instances of homosexuality. It also makes it criminal to, as a landlord, even rent an apartment to someone in the community, or as a doctor to provide healthcare services, or as a restaurant owner to even serve food to someone in the community. And the students have been working with activists there to challenge the constitutionality of that legislation. And as you were all talking about small wins, I remember last quarter, one of the students asked them, you know, how do you engage in this work in the face of setbacks? And one of them said, you wouldn't have a setback if you hadn't made progress. So for us, we think about setbacks as a sign that we have made some progress. And often there's a lot of pressure on the human rights field to show success and change, and they shared, you know, sometimes with the human rights field, you're trying to advance change, but sometimes you're also working really hard to make sure we don't move backwards. So I think much of the clinic is, you know, teaching students skills, of course, but also teaching them, how do you stay resilient and creative and hopeful in the work that we're doing? So that's one bucket of rights. We also have rights on a bucket on rights across borders, where we work primarily in Latin America, so in El Salvador, Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, on issues at the intersection of human rights and migrants' rights. And then finally, there's a bucket of rights on peace and justice, where our work is primarily in Kashmir and Ethiopia. And it's so wonderful to have Anuradha in the audience, who has been such a phenomenal advisor and partner in some of our work to our students. She's a Kashmiri journalist. So those are sort of the buckets of rights. But in addition to sort of what we do in the clinic, much of what we teach in the clinic is how do you do it? So what are the values that underlie the work, and who leads the work? I think at Stanford, we're sort of in a bubble within a bubble within a bubble, and there are so many critiques of how actors in the global north engage in human rights work. So we teach students, we have classes on critiques of the human rights field, how do you engage in decolonial human rights advocacy. And then in terms of careers, I think we also really think hard about, okay, how do we support students into careers in this field? How do we think about summer internships and fellowships and, you know, other spaces in which students can continue to develop their learning? So that's sort of what I'll say about the clinic, but just wanted to say again, what a joy it was to just be able to listen to each of you today. And I really think it's like conversations like the one that you were all having with each other that motivates students to pursue human rights careers. So really, really thank you for being here and for doing all that you do.
I'll second everything that you said. We want this to be a useful event for you too, so if you do have any questions for any of the staff at the Human Rights Foundation about pursuing careers, any questions for Gulika, please do stay after the event and chat with us. On the back of your programs are also some more options for getting involved in human rights work, from sharing your takeaways from this event on social media, which we just spoke about, to interning with human rights activists through our Oslo Scholars Program. You can also consider coming to the Oslo Freedom Forum, which is our flagship conference that happens every year annually in Oslo, where you'll meet many more dissidents who are working on the front lines of social change. So with that, I'll invite you to please join us in the courtyard. We have lots of pizza, drinks. All of our speakers are here to talk with you, answer any of your questions, and thank you so much for your time today. Thank you, Gulika.